Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new Ninjago video here on the channel. My name is TannerFishies. In today's video, we are going to be discussing a few statements and a few answers brought to us by Ninjago series head writer Doc Wyatt over on Blue Sky. Of course, he answers Ninjago fan questions every now and then, and we do talk about the answers that he gives if they intrigue me. And in this case, we have some very intriguing answers. In today's video, we have a bunch of questions and a bunch of answers surrounding the Overlord, a fan-favorite Ninjago villain. However, in the case of some of these answers, I feel like they will be kind of controversial. More on that momentarily. So as usual, someone asks Doc Wyatt a bunch of questions over on Blue Sky. Again, these are pretty much just all Overlord related. Feel free to pause and read if you would like. However, the first one that we are going to be talking about is question number 2. Does the Overlord know about the Source Dragons, and if he does, why has he never tried to dominate them? To which Doc Wyatt replies with, sure, and who says he didn't try? Okay, so very much, again, proposing the possibility that the Overlord at one point in time did try to dominate the Source Dragons. It does make sense that the Overlord would know about them. The Overlord is a very non-traditional Ninjago villain. He's definitely not as cosmic as the Source Dragons would be, I would say. However, he is maybe spiritual enough to the point where he would know about the Source Dragons, and in a way, the Overlord and the Source Dragons are rather similar to one another. They both exist on this very strange plane of existence, and all things considered, they are very much important beings. The Overlord being a crucial being to the existence of Ninjago, at least before the merge, and obviously we know the significance of the Source Dragons. So the Overlord knowing about the Source Dragons would make a lot of sense. But in terms of if he ever tried to, I guess, attack or dominate the Source Dragons, it kind of sounds like he did, since Doc Wyatt replied, who says he did not try. Of course, we never saw these events play out in full, but maybe we could see something like that in the future. I would not mind a Garmadon-style Overlord comic, for example. Maybe going into his origins, his history, maybe his ties to the Source Dragons, if any. In the case of the Dragons Rising show, I'm not sure if that storyline will ever be answered unless the Overlord ends up being the master of Lord Ras, which is definitely a popular Ninjago fan theory at the moment. I personally don't think it's all that possible, just because I feel like the Ninjago show is kind of just done with the Overlord at this point. More on that momentarily too. But again, if the Overlord does end up being Lord Ras's master for some reason, I feel like his history with the Source Dragons will be properly addressed by the show, but I don't find that to be very likely. So again, maybe a comic, maybe another form of storytelling could explain, the Overlord's history with the Source Dragons. As a huge Overlord fan, I would like to see that personally. Then we get into some of the more controversial answers and questions, I suppose, that were asked. So question number 8 and 9 here. Is the Overlord stronger than the Forbidden Five, and could the Overlord defeat Thunderfang? Very loaded questions, and Doc Wyatt replies to the Forbidden Five depends on what state the five are in, and with Thunderfang, it depends on the conditions. So if it depends on the conditions, it kind of sounds like there is a possibility that the Forbidden Five and even Thunderfang individually could take on and defeat the Overlord, which I suspect will not come across very good to some Ninjago fans out there. Because here we have this insanely powerful being, the Overlord, the ultimate evil, and he can apparently be defeated, again, if the conditions are right, by the Forbidden Five and also by Thunderfang. I think Thunderfang makes a lot of sense, considering that Thunderfang is a very strong dragon, and he was actually, again, trying to become a Source Dragon, suggesting that, at least according to Thunderfang, he is strong enough to become a Source Dragon, and I feel like the Source Dragons could easily defeat the Overlord, no question about that. But again, Thunderfang I could see more than the Forbidden Five. I feel like that is going to be something that a lot of Ninjago fans are kind of annoyed with. I will say, Doc Wyatt did specify it depends on what state the five are in. Maybe the Forbidden Five on their own cannot defeat the Overlord. Maybe they need a boost in power. Maybe in their prime they could defeat the Overlord. But all things considered, I feel like it does make sense when you think about it from the perspective of the Forbidden Five are kind of like on the same level as the Overlord, if that makes sense. The Overlord has obviously tried to conquer Ninjago at several points in history, and all things considered, in the realm of Ninjago specifically, the Overlord was, you know, the most powerful villain. However, in the wildness, the Forbidden Five did something similar. They committed, again, a lot of genocide, they attacked a lot of tribes, and all things considered, created this massive assault on the realm itself. You could totally see the Forbidden Five as being the Overlord of the wildness. So I guess that does kind of make sense when you think about it like that. But again, I'm sure a lot of hardcore old school Ninjago fans are going to be upset about this, the possibility that the Five could take on and defeat the Overlord. I will say, power scaling in Ninjago, from what it is right now, again, it's not really the most clear thing ever, and I doubt we will ever see the Forbidden Five, take on the Overlord physically, but I feel like maybe a lot of this is being done to make the Overlord maybe seem like less of a threat. And I suppose that would make sense too, because when you think about it following the merge, the world is now 16 times bigger. Therefore, we have 16 times the threats. There's a high chance that there are stronger enemies than the Overlord out there. And again, with the Forbidden Five being the Overlord of the wildness, each realm could possibly have their own Overlord, if that makes sense. Their own strongest antagonist, their own strongest villain that the ninja could end up facing later on. Again, the Overlord is not a being that is specific to the merged lands. He was specific to Ninjago. He was Ninjago's strongest villain, but when compared to other realms and other threats in those realms, again, if the Overlord is truly able to be taken on by the Forbidden Five, each realm could totally have their own Overlord-style villain, their own biggest threat. Like I said, Dragon's Rising does seem to be done with the Overlord. I'm not sure if the Overlord will ever pop up again in the context of the merge, in the context of Dragon's Rising. Probably not, if I had to take a guess. I don't think they would ever bring back the Overlord in a significant role. Instead, again, introducing these new threats that are kind of Overlord scale, I think that's a good way to one-up what we've seen before. And again, it does make sense, since the world is 16 times bigger, it does make sense that there are more threats out there. But with that being said, everyone, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for my thoughts here. Like I said, just a few updates surrounding the Overlord, and there are more questions here and more answers that were given. Obviously, we only talked about a few questions, so if you would like to pause and once again check out the other questions and other answers, feel free to do so. But I talked about the ones that were interesting to me. We do have more statements from Doc Wyatt that we will address in upcoming videos, so stay tuned. I just wanted to talk about Overlord stuff in today's video. So leave all of your thoughts down below in the comments. What exactly do you think of all of these updates, and who do you think would win if the Forbidden Five and the Overlord were to fight? What about the Overlord and Thunderfang? Who would win that battle? Leave all of your thoughts down below, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this one, feel free to like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will talk to you guys again very, very soon. Peace.